my breakdown of the Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomena paper. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about or what that means, hit this button right here to go watch part 1 of this series. Otherwise, welcome back, let's get right into it. When we left off, we were just getting into the section called Available Reporting, Largely Inconclusive, and it starts with the subheading, Limited Data Leaves Most UAP Unexplained. After the paper talks about how it's curbed by limited data and data inconsistency for UAP reportings for like the 10th millionth time, we learned that the Navy actually had no standardized way to report UAPs until March 2019, and that the Air Force adapted that in November 2020. Apparently, the UAPTF regularly heard anecdotally during its research about other observations that occurred but which were never captured in formal or informal reporting by those observers. Again, another way for the government to say, hey, that was not an officially documented event, either by robot or camera or you retelling your story for documentation purposes. That's just something that you saw and slash a story that you told one time. After that, the paper continues saying that the UAPTF focused on reports that involved UAP largely witnessed firsthand by military aviators and that were collected from systems we considered to be reliable. So basically this paper is focused and may or may not only include things that were captured not by people's stories and experiences, but captured by camera or captured by military equipment or anything within that circle. Okay, but then we got a plot twist. Turns out that this entire time, while they've been claiming, hey, all of these stories are from 2004 to 2021, it's a lie because of the lack of reporting standardization between the Navy and the Air Force, etc., etc. They actually say that most of the reports within this paper happened within the last 2 years. This is because the new reporting mechanism became better known to the military aviation community. And then we have a little bit more data collection information. We learned that 144 of these reports are from the United States government, while 80 of them include some sort of sensor involvement. And then we have this little nugget, which says most reports described UAP as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit juicier. This section of the paper, called UAP Collection Challenges, is about the sociocultural stigmas and sensor limitations that surround the collection of UAP data. AKA, if you talk about aliens, you're crazy. The paper continues saying, although the effects of these stigmas have lessened as senior members of the scientific, policy, military, and intelligence communities engage on the topic seriously in public, reputational risk may keep many observers silent, complicating scientific pursuit of the topic. So yeah, maybe it's getting easier to talk about these things because we're talking about them on a more public and official and authoritative level. But again, there's still that stigma that if you're talking about aliens or unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomena, it can lead to a destroyed reputation. This section continues saying that the sensors capturing UAPs and UAP activity are not designed for that. As a result, those sensors are not generally suited for identifying UAP. Then the report goes on to talk about what is good for capturing UAP information, such as sensor vantage points, the number of sensors, the type of sensors, such as radio frequency sensors or even optical sensors. And now we're on to the next subsection, but some potential patterns do emerge. We get a lot of blah blah blah, stuff is limited, we can't confirm things, not enough information, blah 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 here, until the ODNI says there was some clustering of UAP observations regarding shape, size, and particularly propulsion. UAP sightings also tended to cluster around US training and testing grounds, but we assess that this may result from a collection bias as a result of focused attention, greater numbers of latest generation sensors operating in those areas, unit expectations, and guidance to report anomalies. While the director of the ODNI does make a good point here, saying that there is probably some bias around where the UAPs are gathering, it doesn't really change the fact that there are a lot of UAPs that are gathering around military grounds and US military training facilities. Total side note, I don't know if any of you watched The Phenomenon, or maybe it was Above Majestic, it was some alien documentary, but they talked about how a lot of alien activity, or supposed alien activity, neither confirmed nor denied, blah blah blah, happened around nuclear warhead bases during the Cold War, and that the aliens were warning them like, don't use these, it's bad for you. But just a little side thought on the idea that the aliens are appearing near military bases. Moving on to the next subsection, we learned that in 18 different incidences, described in 21 different reports, that observers reported unusual UAP movement and flight characteristics. Some UAPs remained stationary in the presence of wind, moved against the wind, maneuvered abruptly or with considerable speed without a discernible means of propulsion. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems even registered radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. This section concludes by saying that the UAPTF would like to conduct more analysis by multiple teams or groups of technological experts to determine the nature and validity of these data. We are conducting further analysis to determine if breakthrough technologies were demonstrated. This section gives a more elaborate explanation to the 5 types of UAPs mentioned previously. First, we've got airborne clutter. These can be birds, balloons, recreational unmanned aerial vehicles, airborne debris like plastic bags that muddle a scene and affect an operator's ability to identify true targets, like, for example, an enemy aircraft. Next, we've got natural atmospheric phenomena. This includes ice crystals, moisture, and thermal fluctuations that may register on some infrared and radar systems. Third is the USG or Industry Development Programs. Some UAP observations could be attributed to developments in classified programs by U.S. entities. We were unable to confirm, however, that these systems accounted for any of the UAP reports we collected. Maybe the UAP came from some sort of government entity or some sort of government-supported entity, but again, they can neither confirm nor deny this, whether it's because they don't know or if it's because they do not want to reveal projects that they're working on to the public. Next is foreign adversary systems. Some UAP may be technologies deployed by China, Russia, another nation, or a non-governmental entity. In this case, the UAP did not have United States government origins or even related programs, developmental programs origins. Instead, it came from another country, again, like they listed, such as China or Russia, or maybe even just a private company that's running things and didn't let the government know what they were doing. The point is, the government has no idea what's going on in these situations. And that finally brings us to the other pile. Although most of the UAP described in our data set probably remains unidentified due to limited data or challenges to collection, processing, or analysis, we may require additional scientific knowledge to successfully collect on, analyze, and characterize some of them. We would group such objects in this category pending scientific advances that allowed us to better understand them. The UAPTF intends to focus additional analysis on the small number of cases where UAP appeared to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management. Okay, so this group is our UFO/alien group, whatever you want to call it. Anything that doesn't come from another nation that they can't identify, etc., etc., maybe it is more scientifically advanced than they anticipated, is dropped in this pile. Like they said, there's a lot of issues going on here. Data collection, analysis issues. They don't have the proper tools and equipment to do these analysis because they're not scientifically advanced enough. As the UAPTF pointed out, while this is a small pool of cases, it's also the ones that include unusual movement, signature management, or weird flight characteristics, which I think is very interesting. This section essentially says that UAPs are a flight hazard and that they could pose as a bigger risk if it is foreign entities spying on the United States. It continues by saying that the aviators, aka the pilots, are required to report any safety hazards that they encounter during flights. However, given that the UAPTF only has 11 documented cases of pilots encountering UAPs during flights, assuming that this is since 2004, I think that it can be safely assumed that required is a loose term. If you read on, it turns out that that assumption is actually right, because depending on the location, volume, and behavior of hazards during incursions on ranges, pilots may cease their test and/or training and land their aircraft, which has a deterrent effect on reporting. AKA pilots don't love reporting their issues because it gets in the way of their training/jobs. And that's not even bringing into account the amount of paperwork that I'm sure has to be filled out when you're reporting a UAP issue. As for the national security portion of this section, the UAPTF currently lacks any data that points to any of these UAPs being part of a foreign government's data collection program, or that they're a sign of potential technological advances by a potential adversary. But as they wrote, they're going to continue monitoring that situation. The conclusion of this paper includes a promise from the UAPTF to the reader, stating that its long-term goals include widening the scope of its work to include a broader range of UAPs through increased personnel, technical systems, AIs, analysis, and cooperating with other government agencies. Through these things, they'll be able to detect more data trends and see if objects like wildlife or weather balloons match any previously reported phenomena. It goes on to say that most of the UAP data comes from the Navy, but that they are trying to standardize across not only the military, but all other government services. They also put in that little bid for money and say that, you know, we're over here, like if you want to fund us for better information or whatever, like give us that cash money, cha-ching, cha-ching, bang, bang. Thanks for watching.